As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Mike and Will from Some to the podcast. The new Some record, Let the Light In, is out today on Pelagic Records. Some just got off tour with former podcast guest Earthside, and I got to see the band on the second to last date of the tour, and they were absolutely phenomenal. You can find photos from that show plus a mini review over on Substack. A link will be in the show notes. The guys talk about their musical backgrounds, how previous bands and a collective label led to making music together, navigating obstacles throughout their career, the vision for the new record, streaming music, and more. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of As the Story Grows. If you're brand new to the podcast, welcome. I would like to give a shout out to our newest Patreon member, Joshua Sargent. Thanks for supporting the show. I appreciate it. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon member and getting early access to every episode, you can find a link to our Patreon page in the show notes. In addition to our newsletter on Substack and our Patreon page, you can find a link in the show notes for our Discord server where you can come join our podcast community, talk about music, talk about the podcast episodes, talk about TVs, movies, whatever. Enjoy today's conversation with Mike and Will from Some.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, good. It depends on how recently I've opened my news app and looked at what's going on.
Yeah.
That's how I'm doing.
Moment to moment.
Yeah,
it's true.
Good overall.
You come on here and you try to talk about music for 30, 40 minutes and forget all the other shit. And then my wife is texting me screenshots from the news and I'm like, please stop.
Right. Yeah.
I just turned on Do Not Disturb.
Let's talk about it a little.
Yeah.
Focus up.
That's great. Where are you guys located? I tried to search the internet and I could not find a location other than America.
That's so funny. So I'm in Connecticut.
Okay.
And Mike and Joel are in New York, and Justin is out in Denver, our drummer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fun.
And we all get together and meet at Will's studio in Connecticut. That's where we do most of our practicing and recording and everything.
Nice.
Really all of it, I guess.
Yeah. That's cool. Are you originally East Coasters, Connecticut, New York area, or is there a migration?
Yeah, for them all. Mike's from New Jersey. I was originally from Connecticut. We met up in Boston together. We've been friends forever. Justin's originally from Denver, where he lives again. Joel's from Louisiana, and he's been all over the country. He's lived all over the place.
Nice.
She sings rock and roll dreams from coast to coast.
Got it. Some people have that desire to make it work and do whatever it takes, and some people are content just to make it and whatever.
Where are you, Brian?
Just north of DC.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where exactly? Just curious. I was born outside of DC, so.
Okay. Rockville, Montgomery County.
Okay. Yeah. I was in Alexandria for early years of my life. Don't really remember much, but.
Nice. When me and my wife got married, that's where we lived, and then we moved to Philadelphia, and now we're back here.
Nice.
Yep.
Cool.
On the other side of the river.
Yep.
What got each of you into music?
Going way back, huh?
Yeah.
So as a listener, the first thing I really think about is Michael Jackson, just being a kid and really, really thinking that was larger than life and cool. As far as picking up drums, so I started as a drummer. I wanted to play drums in school and stuff, and I was going to the local shop and started taking lessons there, and I think it was just alt rock, whatever was kind of on the radio at that point.
Yeah.
And then kind of as I got into high school, I wanted to pick up a guitar when I think it was probably Nine Inch Nails or Ministry, something like that, Godflesh, that kind of stuff. That it was I want to make those kind of sounds, and I didn't really know how other than by picking up a guitar. And that sort of started the real nerdy stuff that I've always been into, the production stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I mean, I think my first cassette tape was like MC Hammer. I was like living in the Bronx as a child, and that's just what was going on at that time. But what the evolution of going from that to making like music like what we do was kind of paved with the road was paved with stuff like just like everybody else around. Like I was a teenager in the 90s and listening to like all of the amazing stuff that was happening, coming out of Seattle, obviously, like, and that's the stuff that just kind of blew my dome, like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Nirvana, like those, and then also, Nine Inch Nails as well remember, like, that was a huge one for me. So all of those things kind of just coalesced, and then like getting into the DIY, like kind of punk scene around me, going to a lot of shows, like in church basements and things like that, and realizing that there was something else, like there was not just, there wasn't just the stuff you'd see on MTV or hear on the radio or whatever, like there was also this other underground scene. And I don't know if you said you were, you lived in Philly, like, are you familiar with WSOU, that radio station?
No.
There's this college radio station. It's still around, Seton Hall University. They're based in like South Jersey, and they played like the best music. Like it's all metal. It's like, and that was, I think, for me and a lot of other people, like just just turn that on and just get an education in like good like metal and underground music, and it was just like amazing. And I love that it's still going too.
That's awesome.
I think that there's also a big turning point for me, at least, and Mike and I went to college together, so this kind of all happened together. Is that I worked at Hydra Records, I interned for them, and just like being in the same room as people that were talking about going on tour and like going to the Middle East and other venues around Boston, and just seeing these guys that were like human, and you could interact with them. You're like, oh, there's like a path that you can actually go out and do this stuff, and not just write riffs in your bedroom. So that was like a big aha moment for me, and kind of changed the trajectory of my 20s.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's this thing where like music is such this big, like it's on MTV, it's on the radio, and then once you discover the smaller scene, you're like, oh no, this is tangible and something I can actually do, and like it changes the course of your life if that's what you want and you're interested in it, of course. Yeah. So I see you both went to Boston for college.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where we met.
Nice.
We went to Emerson College.
That's awesome. And at what point do you two decide to start making music together? I mean,
it's funny. It's an interesting path because we were close friends. I mean, I definitely want to hear your perspective on this too, Mike. But we ended up starting a record label together, and it just felt like we probably shouldn't be in the same band if we're going to run a record label together. And I feel like in hindsight, there was probably part of me that was like, I wanted to preserve the friendship because, I already knew how volatile being in bands could be. And I felt like there was a bigger purpose, like having a record label and like helping out bands. But like, even with my first touring band, Constance, like Mike would come out and play guitar with us if he had time off. And like, he did artwork for us. So it was like always a really like communal relationship.
Yeah.
And then, then go ahead. Yeah.
And then for, I met the guys, the Junius guys. Well, Junius wasn't a thing yet, but I met those guys, and then we started writing and making music as Junius. And Will recorded our first EP, and at that time we were kind of going through a revolving door of bass players. So he ended up being, playing bass for us for several shows and being essentially like our first real bassist for a little while too. So I guess that was the first time we officially documented on record, like played music together. Nice. But it's a friendship that's gone back many years, and all of us in SOM have been, have played together and have been friends for a long time. We've played together in various bands. We met Justin, our drummer, like on the road. I'm not sure which of us. I think Junius met him first. Yeah, we met at a VFW hall in Fargo, North Dakota. Junius was playing. There was like this sort of like DIY festival, and his old band Adai was playing. And we were like blown away by them. We immediately became like fast friends and stayed in touch over the years. And we released some of their music on our label. and we did more tours together. And then he kind of he ended up like, you know, doing merch, and then eventually like filling in for our drummer when he couldn't do tours. And you know, we've all been in like one big circle. And same goes for Joel. Like we met him on tour. His band played with us in Shreveport, Louisiana, and we kind of like we immediately became like fast friends. And he also worked at a liquor store at that time, and would just like slip like cases of alcohol out the door, and that also helped
lubricate the friendship,
like the fire of our friendship. Yeah. We're like, oh, we love this guy. I don't know what it is about him, but
keep him close.
I really like this guy. Yeah. But yeah, he was an amazing guitarist, and we eventually, you know, we were parting ways with our bass player at the time, and he, you know, that revolving door, and he jumped in and joined the band, and that was kind of it from there. And so yeah, we've all got like these long interweaving kind of histories together, but it's kind of all culminated in this band, which I feel like has been a really good I don't know. I feel like it's a good blend of all of our best strengths. You know, like we finally found like the balance and what we all kind of do, and how to make it work in a way that is cohesive and fun for all of us and brings out our best.
Yeah. When the band is getting started, because you have this post-rock background, I mean, hearing you work for Hydra Head, maybe it's not really an influence, but like I can hear that now when you say that. Like, were there things you knew instinctively you wanted to do differently than you had done in the past?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I could write a book about what I would do, what I've done differently in Psalm than what I did before Psalm. Yeah, I mean, like the initial thing was like I think I even had like a document before Psalm started, and I think I shared it with you, Mike, at some point. But just like all the things that I wanted to do, and it really just started with like I need to have fun, and I need to be able to write heavy riffs and be around my friends, and like it's got to be like a good group of people that respect each other and sort of, you know, are working toward a common goal. And yeah, I could go on and on about that, but that's sort of that's the headline, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you always know you could sing?
No, I feel like it's a work in progress, honestly. I've been trying to sing since I was like, 12, and I feel like I finally kind of figured out my way of singing with this band. It was kind of an aha moment, and I feel like I've been kind of like incrementally getting okayer and more okay at it over the years. So
yeah, that's cool. What was the inspiration or genesis for the band name?
It was the only one we could agree on. We liked the way it looked. We liked that it sort of implied somber, soma. It's had, just had like a looming darkness to it, without actually being like a clearly defined thing. Yeah, that's the best answer I can give you. Yeah, so basically what we started off as a 3-piece with the intention of having Joel come in and play guitar live, at least, because he was busy with another band called Drift Off that Mike was in. And then we had a couple tour offers that Joel couldn't do, and we reached out to Mike to see if he wanted to do it, and then that tour didn't happen, and then we ended up doing another tour that Joel and Mike were available for. It was like, well, let's just try it as a 5-piece. That could be fun. And like within a week of doing the shows, we were like, I think this is the band. And then we started working on music as a 5-piece, and then the pandemic happened. So it was an interesting time for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Did it feel like the momentum was swept out from under you? Like, or was it just like, okay, this is time to try to craft something we're really proud of? And was the pandemic how you guys were able to work out your deal with Pelagic?
Yeah. I mean, it was a little of both for me.
Yeah.
I'll let you speak on it, Mike.
Yeah. There was definitely a feeling like we had a couple of tour offers and some things that were in on the table, and we had shows booked, and we were like really bummed that stuff got canceled. But as far as creatively, it ended up being this really great thing, I think.
Totally.
It gave us the chance to obviously have the time to just sit down and focus on what we were doing and really, think about it and put a lot more time and effort into it than we probably would have otherwise. And we ended up putting out that EP, which was, you mentioned Pelagic. We've known those guys forever as well, from our old bands and from our labels that we've worked with. We've crossed paths with them. Anyway, all that to say, we've known those guys for a long time.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, we don't know what's going to go on. Like we had the better part of the album of songs written, and we were like, well, we're not going to put this out right now. Like, we don't know what's going on. We should, like everybody else, we just want to wait and see what's going on. But at the same time, we were also really excited about the music that we were making, and we wanted to at least share some of it with the world. So we're like, well, let's like pick like 2 songs and we'll put them out and maybe make like an EP out of it. And then that kind of snowballed into like some friends doing some remixes. And then that became what like the Awake EP became. And then we're like, well, let's just put it out on cassette and see what happens. But we shared it with Pelagic, and they're like, hey guys, like, we would actually really love to put this out on vinyl and do it. So we weren't even planning on, we were originally just going to throw it up on Bandcamp and like kind of see what happened. But then they were like, yeah, like they wanted to make it a real release and put it on vinyl. And we're like, yeah, sure. That's awesome. And I think the fact that everything kind of stopped and all of like the bigger artists had pressed pause on everything that they were doing. Like, nobody was, it helped us out. There was a little bit of a vacuum there. So we were able to put stuff out, and we might have found a slightly bigger audience than it would have otherwise, because, people were hungry and we didn't have as much competition from like the big artists who were kind of waiting to see what would happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then it got really well received and kind of gave us some newfound sort of momentum, and it kind of informed how we went about the writing and completion of the rest of the album. Because the whole process was crazy. That was the first time we've ever like done our writing and recording like that. But that also really like, we kind of refined our process during that time, and that's kind of it's shaped how we write music together now. So it found a good flow to it all. Yeah, that we wouldn't have otherwise.
That's awesome. I guess the story of Som is like, before you record or in the midst of recording, there's chaos with Duncan leaving.
Now that you put it like that.
Yeah, who knows? Hopefully nothing will happen before the next one, right? I mean, it's going to be a long 4 years, but so you guys play musical chairs. How easy was the process of just like, you stepping in for bass and kind of, it was not having to look outside to like, okay, now we need a new drummer, and just like, okay, we can keep this in house.
I mean, the process was a little bit tricky, but it felt really natural when we did it. Justin was definitely like, fuck it, guys. Like, we're not getting a drummer. Like, I'm going to be the drummer.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And then, just talking to other people, they're like, dude, just play bass, like, just do it. Why get another person? Like, so like,
yeah. And that's what we did.
Made a lot of sense. Go ahead.
I was just going to say like that process, like all of us going through that actually started way before the album part. Cause we had to do that for a couple of tours, because Duncan wasn't able to do like 2 or 3 tours that we did. So we actually had to figure that all out. And, in a short span of time, like, well, how are we going to play these shows? What are we going to do? Do we get in a fill-in drummer?
Yeah.
So long before the album was like a thing.
Gotcha. Album's called Let the Light In. That's the second track on the album. Where did that concept come from, and why does that represent this album?
So it sort of started during the pandemic for me. I'd wake my daughter up every morning. She was 2 at the time, and I just opened the blinds and just kind of like, I was reminding myself, like, try to bring some positivity in here. Like, literally just open the blinds, let the light in, take a breath, and just try to bring some optimism into this situation. And that sort of was the kernel that sort of grew into the concept of the album, and how, we wanted to, we knew we could be heavy. We knew we could be gloomy and dark, but like, could we inject that sound with a little bit of hope and optimism? And that was sort of the goal of the record. That became the goal of the record for us.
Were there different production techniques or, I don't know, effects you used, especially on like the guitar side of the album? Like, it definitely has I don't know if lighter is the right word, but there's a different ambience to this record than the previous two.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we definitely tried a lot of different things. I don't know how nerdy you want to get.
I'll get nerdy.
Yeah. So what we did, the thing that we used differently this time is we like blended in a lot of cab sims.
Okay.
So it wasn't just microphones. It was a blend of microphones and cab sims and some even DI stuff, just straight DI into the board. So a lot of times you're hearing mixtures of, like, a lot of the stuff for Mike in particular would be like reamp through a Fender Bassman, mic'd in the live room, fed through a cab sim, copy and paste a DI track that's just going straight into, let's say, a phaser or something like that, and then just finding a blend of all three of those elements for different parts of the song to make sure as much clarity of his parts can come through in those parts. So just a lot of stuff like that where it's just, little moves of different sounds to try to make things feel as big as possible all the time.
Yeah. Who came up with the album artwork design?
That was me. Yeah. That's kind of been the art and design side of things has been sort of my wheelhouse for a long time with most of our bands. This one in particular was a tricky one. I didn't know what to, I was kind of struggling with it. And actually, Joel was the one who reminded me about, I had this old treasure trove of these old slides that I found years ago. Someone had was throwing them out on the street, and there was this old, like, dusty old projector, and I opened it up, and it had this little, like, secret compartment that had all these old family slides from like the 50s and 60s. And I've been wanting to use them for something forever, and it never felt like the right sort of thing. And I realized, like, I was kind of revisiting them again. I was like, oh, I love this. This is, like, encapsulates this moment so well. The cover is like this image of, like, this sort of, like, 1950s, 1960s living room, kind of seen through these sort of bars. And I just felt like that was so perfect. Like, it encapsulates to me, like, this moment that we're in where, like, everyone is sort of, like, looking through this, like, lens or through these bars of, like, trying to, like, look back on this sort of nostalgic past or this idea of a world that maybe never actually existed. That's motivating so many people in our world these days. But the reality is that it's actually a prison. Like, the idea of, being sort of chained to this, nostalgic idea is actually, imprisoning and kind of holding you back. And I just felt like this one image sort of captured this entire thing when I so well. So I don't know, that's sort of what it meant to me. And it sort of clicked. It was kind of, at first seemed like maybe an odd choice for the cover of a record like this, but then, it sort of, as I sat with it, I was like, I can't imagine anything else at this point. It feels actually just right.
Yeah. I mean, the band definitely has a distinct visual aesthetic. While none of the covers look alike, like, the aesthetic ties it all together. And I love, like, the cycles of the moon under the album title. That's really cool. That's nice. A fun little thing that, like, I saw it in a small little thing, and I, like, clicked to make it bigger, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I dig that a lot.
Awesome. Thank you.
So to visually represent the idea of, letting the light in a literal way.
Yeah.
But thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, were there other things kind of lyrically you were drawing from as you were approaching this record? And, like, have you found your approach to writing lyrics changing and evolving as the band goes on?
Yeah, for sure. I'm definitely I try to be more cognizant of what I'm saying. usually ideas could just kind of start with mumbling, and then I try to find ideas in that, or sometimes I'll just jot something out that feels like it's a strong thing that I want to work in there, and then I kind of like build around that. But as far as themes and stuff, I try to just be open-minded about what comes out. There's no like, I try to not be like rigid in how I approach anything.
Album's out March 14th. You guys are hitting the road here shortly with Earthside, which should be a fucking phenomenal show. I'm glad you guys
are very stoked.
Baltimore. I'm very stoked to
nice.
Come out and see you guys. I sure hope so if everything works. But is that just what's on the books now? Do you have other plans for this year, whether to try to get over to Europe or?
We have plans, but nothing's solidified yet. But we definitely have some irons in the fire that hopefully everything will come together. Have you gotten to hear the whole thing?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, it's really rad. So
great.
Yeah, I think like The Place That I Belong and Give Blood are like two of my favorite tracks on the album.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, man, it's always interesting to get the early feedback on stuff because it's still our little baby that we haven't put out into the world yet. So I was just saying to Mike, it's like, it's nice to have some conversations ahead of the tour because we're about to go play these songs in front of strangers who've never heard them necessarily. Mm-hmm. So it's nice to hear like that it's resonating with you already.
Well, it's always interesting because there are some labels and bands who their approach is like this like 6 month to a year album rollout cycle. So it's like by the time the record comes out and you go tour, everybody's heard all the songs already, and it's just
right.
I don't know. Like that's fine. That's how music is done these days. But I like getting the whole thing and listening to it as a whole because that was your intention, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the slightly frustrating things about the way music is consumed these days. That we were actually pushing to make the lead up to the album as long as possible because we wanted to be able to like put out like as many, like we're doing like 5 music videos for this. Mm-hmm. We wanted to be able to like give as much time and attention to these songs as possible, and obviously when you're playing the game of like Spotify and like the all the online, music streaming services, like the more space you kind of give things and the more you kind of like, you have the more quote unquote singles you have, the more chances you get to get more ears on your stuff. So it can be that's an exciting thing to do. But then the frustrating side of it is like, you work so hard to make something that's like a cohesive album, but then you have to wait so long for people to actually hear it and it's fully realized sense, and they will have already heard like half of it, so it's like, it's kind of, we've had to recalibrate our ideas of that, because we're not that sort of band that can just pull like a, like what Hum did, or or like or Beyonce, or they're like a relatively smaller artist that was able to do it, but like where you can just surprise drop an entire album out of nowhere, like we can't do that. Like,
nope. Even as it is, 4 weeks after the album's out, people are like, when's your next record coming out? Like, we just 2 years on that.
Right. You know how much time we spent? God damn. Yeah, I've been reading this book, Mood Machine, which is about Spotify and how it's changed.
Oh, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, and I'm
Mood Machine?
By Liz Pelly. I'm about halfway through because I was just like, I'm just going to run through this book. I was flying and I was like, I'll just read the book on the plane, but I had to stop because it made me so mad because you're just like, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's just capitalism fucking over art, which is what always happens. But you're just like,
classic.
In some ways, I'm like, I don't know, does it apply to this genre and our scene and like underground music? But it's also just like, man, so many bands are getting fucked trying to play this game. Like, yeah. But it's a fascinating read for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna check it out. I mean, the flip side of it, and that's like, I always say this, like I try to keep 2 ideas in my head. Like they can be fucking us while they're helping us. Like I cannot overstate how many people have come up to me at merch tables and been like, dude, I heard you guys on Spotify. I came out to the show. I bought a ticket, and I hear I'm buying a vinyl and a T-shirt, and they would have never heard of us without this evil service.
Right. That balance.
So it's like Yeah,
Yeah.
there's gotta be a better way, because the technology is amazing. They just, they don't treat artists with like we're an afterthought, which is not how you run a business.